Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey, what do you want to say to the killer of your daughter?
We'll find you. We will find you. I have that as a sole mission for the rest of my life.
Mrs. Ramsey?
Likewise, the police and investigators have assured us that this is a case which can be solved. You know, you may be eluding the authorities for a time, but God knows who you are, and we will find you.
Jonbenet Ramsey was born on August 6, 1990, and unfortunately had her life cut short at the age of 6 when she was brutally murdered in late December of 1996. During her childhood, she was best known as a beauty pageant star. She also came from a wealthy family thanks to her father. John Ramsey, her father, worked at the forefront of the tech world, starting a computer company in the 1980s that he would later combine with 2 other firms in 1988 to create Access Graphics, which sold Unix-based computer systems. This would go on to become a billion-dollar company. After Access Graphics was purchased by Lockheed Martin in 1991, Ramsey became its president and chief executive, and his net worth was estimated at $6.4 million by 1996. Patsy Ramsey, her mother, attended a university in her home state of West Virginia, where she studied journalism. While attending college, Patsy competed in and won the title of Miss West Virginia 1997. After graduating, Patsy moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and it's there where she met her future husband, John Ramsey. Jonbenet Ramsey was believed to have been murdered during the late night of December 25th or early morning of December 26th. A theory that also goes with this, and once again this hasn't been confirmed as true, was that one of Ramsey's neighbors known as Melody Stanton had heard very loud screaming that night, that of a child for about 5 seconds until it abruptly stopped. At 5:45 a.m. December 26, Patsy Ramsey had discovered a ransom note claiming that their daughter had been kidnapped by a group of individuals, and that she's still safe, but if the Ramseys wanted their daughter to see 1997, then they would need to comply and pay $118,000. Immediately after finding the note, Patsy made a call to 911.
911 emergency.
Police.
What's going on?
515th Street.
What's going on there, ma'am?
We have a kidnapping. Hurry, please.
Explain to me what's going on, okay?
There's a note left and our daughter's gone.
A note was left and your daughter is
Yes.
gone? How old is your daughter?
6 years old. She's gone. 6 years old.
How long ago was this?
I don't know. I just found the note. And my daughter's
Does it say who took her?
What?
Does it say who took her?
I don't know. There's a ransom note here.
It's a ransom note?
It says SBTC. Victory. Please.
Okay, what's your name? Are you
Patsy Ramsey. I'm the mother. Oh my God. Please.
I'm sending an officer over, okay?
Please.
Do you know how long she's been
No,
gone?
I don't. Please, we just got out. Is she right here? Oh my God, please.
Okay, well,
There's somebody.
I am, honey.
Please.
Take a deep breath,
Please,
okay?
hurry.
Patsy, 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 Patsy.
The police arrive and begin questioning what happened and what's known about the situation. Questions are asked to both friends and neighbors of the Ramseys, since by that point, Patsy Ramsey had immediately called whoever she can to come over and help however they can. Detective Linda Art arrived just after 8 a.m. and continued waiting, constantly making phone calls for backup to arrive. Despite this, none showed up and time kept passing. At 1:01 p.m., Linda Art had told John Ramsey to search the house again for any clues or anything suspicious, even though the house had already been searched previously by other officers. Shortly after this, screaming came from the basement and John Ramsey had been yelling for an ambulance. He started walking up the stairs with Jonbenet Ramsey in his arms covered in a blanket. At this point, everyone was in shock and grieving over Jonbenet. Detective Linda Art, however, felt differently, and said that everything she had noted that morning instantly stuck out and started making sense. She went on to consciously count she had 18 bullets in her gun as well. Her reason for this was because she wasn't sure if they'd all be alive when people showed up. Linda was then criticized for both allowing John Ramsey to search the house instead of waiting for backup to arrive no matter how long it takes, and for also allegedly allowing him to place a blanket over Jonbenet's body, which in return contaminated the evidence. Although Linda was criticized, it should be noted that during this whole scenario, Officer Richard French was the responding officer, and had gotten to the house just before 6 a.m. Richard French also didn't do anything to keep the situation calm or keep anyone outside the house who didn't live there. Once Jonbenet's body was taken for examination, it was ruled that her cause of death was strangulation. This wasn't much of a shock, however, considering that when she was found, she had a nylon cord around her neck. What did, however, surprise some was that upon further examination, she appeared to have received a blow to the head because her skull had been fractured. It's likely it was caused from a large bat and happened about an hour before her strangulation. Another thing her autopsy revealed was that her chin had marks that matched the electrodes of that of a stun gun. Lastly, her autopsy had also revealed undigested remnants of pineapple in her stomach. This would suggest that she had eaten just shortly before her death. When questioned, both John and Patsy Ramsey had denied giving her the fruit. Even more shocking, the fingerprints of Burke Ramsey, Jonbenet's brother, were found by police on a bowl of pineapple in the kitchen, just after the murder. Burke was never considered a serious suspect. However, he was also often shielded by his parents from the whole situation. Immediately, concerns began arising by the police, and the media was covering the stories like crazy. Who could have done this to Jonbenet? What was their motive? And more importantly, if they already killed her, why would they leave a ransom note? When the authorities were reviewing what had happened the day of the murder and all the evidence they had currently available, they ran into a couple concerns. One being the window of the basement where Jonbenet was found. It had no signs of forced entry, and there were spiderwebs already on the window the day of the murder, but for how long was unknown. Another concerning issue was the DNA found on Jonbenet's clothing. It matched a male subject, but the police didn't know who. The day after the murder, DNA samples were collected from John Ramsey to see if it matched the samples found on Jonbenet. It came up negative. The police also compared the writing from the ransom note to writing samples from family members. None of them were close enough to be considered a match. However, they still couldn't rule out Patsy Ramsey since her writing most resembled it, and the paper it was written on came from a notebook inside their home. The Ramseys heavily denied doing such actions, and would often tell the police to find the real murderers. They're out there, and time was being wasted.
I'm appalled that anyone would think that John or I would be involved in such a hideous, heinous crime. But let me assure you that I did not kill Jonbenet. I did not have anything to do with it. I love that child with my whole of my heart and soul.
The police, however, wouldn't give up on trying to accuse the Ramseys of the crime. They would still try and find out ways of potentially making them talk.
If I told you right now that we have trace evidence that appears to link you to the death of Jonbenet, what would you tell me?
That is totally impossible. Go retest.
How is it impossible?
I did not kill my child. I didn't have a thing to do with it.
And I'm not talking, somebody's guess or some rumor or some story.
I don't care what you're talking about.
I'm talking about scientific evidence.
I don't give a flying flip how scientific it is. Go back to the damn drawing board. I didn't do it. John Ramsey didn't do it, and we didn't have a clue of anybody who did do it.
Going back to the ransom letter and how it was written, the police had discovered that not only did the paper come from a notepad inside the house, but the pen used for writing it did as well, and whoever wrote it returned it to its container. The authorities checked for fingerprints but never found it to be a match for John or Patsy Ramsey, or anyone in their family for that matter. What puzzled them is how when examining the notepad it revealed writing impressions suggesting a practice letter was written, although those pages were never found. In 1997, the Ramseys had to settle things down with both the media and police to show they weren't guilty of the crime. Both John and Patsy Ramsey sat down with the Boulder police on April 30th, 1997, and had an interview with them regarding what had happened December 25th, 1996. The interview itself, though, only covered questions you typically expect to be asked, such as this one directed toward John Ramsey, asked by Detective Tom Trujillo. What was Jonbenet wearing when you carried her upstairs? To which John Ramsey responded, she had on a white sweater with a silver star and black pants and black vest, and that's what she had on that night. During the interview, Detective Steve Thomas told Patsy Ramsey, I've got to ask you, and I'll ask you right now. Did you participate in any way in the death or events after the death of Jonbenet? And Patsy responded with, no, absolutely not. Steve Thomas then said, Patsy, do you have any knowledge of John participating in this in any way? To which Patsy responded, no. Then Steve says, if that were the case, would you come forward and tell me? And Patsy responds with, of course, yes. On May 2nd, 1997, the Ramseys then had their interview with the local media group grieving over the loss of their daughter, telling the media that both John and Patsy were shocked and appalled at how anyone could think that they would murder their own daughter. John, however, went on to add that both he and Patsy accepted being suspects after understanding that in most cases like this, family members are usually involved. John also said that an arrest must be made for them to gain closure. Time went on and no one was being charged with the crime. No new leads were given, and for a short while, it seemed like all hope was lost. Come 2006, a man named John Mark Carr was arrested after confessing to have murdered Jonbenet Ramsey. Now, it finally sounded like everything was going to be put to rest and justice was finally going to be served. Unfortunately, that wouldn't be the case though. Upon being questioned, he refused to explain how he got into the family's home and provided no details that the police already didn't have publicly available. Alongside this, the DNA evidence taken from Jonbenet's clothes didn't match Carr. John Mark Carr also claimed to have drugged Jonbenet. However, an autopsy showed no drugs in her system at the time of her death. In the end, all this led to him not being charged. Why did he do it though? While Carr has never given an official answer as to why he did it, some believe he did it simply for publicity, while others say he was suffering from some form of delusion. Whatever the case may be, one thing was certain. Jonbenet's true murderer was still out there somewhere. Later in 2016, CBS aired their own special on the Jonbenet case called The Case of Jonbenet Ramsey. And it was during this broadcast that they suggested Jonbenet's brother, Burke Ramsey, was the one guilty of the crime. In this broadcast, the docuseries team theorized that Jonbenet took a piece of Burke's pineapple on Christmas night, enraging him. They alleged Burke could have grabbed a flashlight and hit her on the head. This ultimately led to Burke Ramsey suing for over $750 million. It wouldn't be until January 2018, however, that a Michigan Circuit Court judge said Burke can proceed with the $750 million defamation lawsuit against CBS and others, stating that CBS's disclaimer doesn't negate potentially defamatory meaning. It is now 2018, and still no more evidence has been found to add to the Jonbenet case. And no one has been charged with the crime either. Will this case ever be solved? We can only hope. Rest in peace, Jonbenet.